Two questions, the same answer. The role of demand in prostitution and sex trafficking. Survivors of prostitution and sex trafficking are human beings. You may be asking yourself, what are the two questions? The first is, what is the role of demand in prostitution? The second, what is the role of demand in sex trafficking? The fact that both questions have the same answer should tell us that there's a direct correlation between prostitution and sex trafficking. Many may debate that those who engage in prostitution do so out of choice, while those who are trafficked engage through force, fraud, or coercion. While we're not here to debate today, we can all agree that on both sides, it is a matter of survival, it is the exploitation of human beings, and demand is the driving factor that promotes the existence of prostitution and sex trafficking. The scourge of prostitution and sex trafficking continues to exist in our communities for a number of reasons. To begin with, there is a disregard for the value of human life. As I travel across the world making presentations, I love to ask the audience, what is one thing you value? The response oftentimes are my family, my job, my faith. Rarely do people say life. Traffickers thus capitalize on society's collective disregard for human life, seizing the opportunity to see people as commodities. The demand for prostitution and sex trafficking can be conceptualized in the economical theory of supply and demand, where human beings are at the center. We cannot continue to try to address the issue of demand by separating the core components into categories of adults and children, male and female, survivors of prostitution or survivors of trafficking. We must realize that the common denominator in all categories are human beings. Human beings whose lives are impacted by physical and psychological abuse. Human beings who are in need of help. Survivors of prostitution and sex trafficking are human beings. There are 10 ways that we can effectively address the role of demand in prostitution and sex trafficking. These 10 ways are in no particular order of importance. Number 1, we must begin to change the mindset of our culture and understand the realities of those who engage in prostitution and are trafficked. Intersectionality is at the core. The lack of economic opportunity, lack of education, poverty, race, class, and gender inequality are amongst the reasons why people engage in prostitution and are trafficked. These issues must be addressed if we are to successfully combat demand. Number 2, we must change the mindset of our culture where we're more sympathetic to those who engage in the purchase of commercial sex. We must be more sympathetic to those who are engaged in commercial sex and less sympathetic to the men who purchase sex. The men who purchase sex continues to get a slap on the wrist as their lives are considered to be more valuable. There's no direct impact on their life once they purchase sex. After all, he is the CEO, he's the senator, a family man. He has children. If anyone should find out that he engaged in commercial sex, it will impact his career or his family. While the prostituted or trafficked individual is seen as someone who's neurotic and not deserving of assistance. Number 3, we must understand that language matters. The men who purchase sex should not be given names like Byers and John that hide their misogynistic acts. Those names normalize their behavior. We must begin to call them by their true names: rapists, pedophiles, child molesters, abusers, and such, sending the message that their behavior is not normal nor acceptable. Number 4, enforce existing laws. Many are pushing for stronger laws, but the rule of law is simply not enough. There are laws already on the books that needs to be enforced so that the men who purchase sex are deterred. Law should be enforced without fear of losing a case. And for this reason, I will always honor and respect Cynthia Cortez, the first federal prosecutor in the United States to use the Trafficking Victims Protection Act to prosecute the purchasers of sex trafficking victims in 2009. Of the 7 buyers she prosecuted, in one instance, 6 of them were sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. She was not afraid to use the law. She was not afraid to lose. In fact, she would challenge the detectives to dig deeper into their cases so that victory was imminent for the prosecution. Number 5, follow the recommendations of reports and studies conducted to address demand. In a 2008 Chicago study, Deconstruction the Demand for Prostitution, 113 men who purchased sex were interviewed. When asked what would deter them to purchase sex, 87% stated their name being listed in the local paper. 82% stated their photo and name on the internet. 79% stated a letter sent to their family that they were arrested for soliciting or engaging in prostitution. 70% said a car impounded, and 68% stated a fine larger than $1,000. There are lessons to be learned from each report and study conducted. Number 6, there should be a significant shift in the criminal justice response. Oftentimes, the word victim-centered approach is used. While I applaud the use of this term, a victim-centered approach does not criminalize the victim, but understand that the prostituted or trafficked individual is in need of services. Prostituted and trafficked individuals should not be arrested and charged as criminals, as criminal convictions are a barrier to restoration. For example, with a criminal conviction, trafficked individuals and prostituted individuals don't get access to jobs, education, or housing. Instead, the focus should be placed on arresting and charging buyers and traffickers. Arresting the prostituted individuals further reinforces their exploitation, while the men who purchase sex get away and perpetuate the cycle of abuse. While I was being trafficked, I was arrested 5 times on a state level. Not once did I ever witness a buyer being arrested, yet alone charged. However, on each occasion I was arrested and charges were brought against me. I can remember the arresting officer telling the driver of one car, "Get out of here," as he proceeded to handcuff me. I remember my first arrest. A strip club I was exploited at was raided, and all the patrons were asked to leave, while the girls were lined up, questioned, and arrested. Not one buyer was arrested. In fact, the undercover operation was set up for the women who propositioned patrons for sex and not for the men who solicited sex. Number 7, we need to learn from existing models that are effective in other countries. We need to take a closer look at the Nordic model, which criminalizes the act of buying sex and decriminalizes the act of selling sex. A 2015 report, Trafficking of Human Beings, stated that the Nordic model has been effective in combating trafficking and prostitution. According to the European Union's harmonized data on trafficking, Sweden and Norway, for instance, have much more lower trafficking prostitution rates than the Netherlands. The United States can learn from this. Number 8, the psychological trauma endured by prostituted individuals and trafficking survivors have lasting impacts. The psychological trauma does not disappear once one exits the life. It lingers and may take years to address, even with trauma-informed counseling and mental health treatment. Like many survivors of trafficking, I too had a quota imposed on me by my trafficker, and there were severe consequences if my quota was not met. The consequences result in both physical and psychological abuse. Both were hurtful, and as oftentimes he would kick me with his Timberland boots, choke me to the point of unconsciousness, and dehumanize me through his verbal abuse, which had lasting psychological impacts. Now, while the physical pain went away in days, it took years to address the psychological abuse that left me to unpack the trauma of not feeling worthy, accepted, or even a human being. While being trafficked, my trafficker never allowed us to have color in our hair or wore our hair curly. He stated that those things are not attractive to buyers. After exiting the life, it took me years to wear my hair curly, as I continued to believe the lie that I had to wear my hair straight to be attractive. Recently, I colored my hair for the first time in my life. What do you think?
Looks good.
But at first, when I colored my hair, each time I looked in the mirror, I was reminded by the words of my trafficker. Some would say, dye your hair black so you won't be reminded. But I will not. I will not allow his words to hold me in bondage 12 years later. I will continue to color my hair as I embrace my truth that I am still beautiful and attractive with my hair colored, as you all agreed. Number 9, a comprehensive model must be implemented. The issue of demand cannot be fought single-handedly. Parents and schools should teach about harms of prostitution and sex trafficking. In addition, employers should implement and enforce strict policies against those who engage in commercial sex, and federal and state policies must be enforced. Number 10, make a conscious effort in all your work to recognize that survivors of human trafficking and prostituted individuals are human beings. We're not just research products, a source of income, or a way to make you feel better about yourself. Just like you and everyone else, our well-being and health and existence are valuable and matters. Despite our past, we too deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I am Shamere McKenzie, and I am a human being. Thank you.